for June 25, 2025. The first item of business is I'd like to have a motion to accept the draft minutes of March 26, 2025. All right, any and all comments will just be forwarded to Katrina, the secretary. Yes, and, can we do a roll call?
Good morning, everyone. Our private members, Michael Spitzer, Chair.
Present.
Mark Kaplan. Marsha Van Wagner.
Present.
We have Larry and Angelo via Zoom. Our public members.
Present.
Thank you. Representing Mayor Eric Adams, Sarah Wong.
Present.
Representing Comptroller Brad Lander, Jacqueline Thompson.
Present.
We have a quorum. Representing Public Advocate Jamani Williams, Matthew Carlin is here. Thank you. We have a quorum.
Okay, the first item of business is a presentation about the cybersecurity for the New York Deferred Compensation Plan.
Do we have to push when we talk?
Yes. You don't have to hold the buttons down anymore. First, let's start by, so that we could get into the minutes. So if there's anybody else, even on Zoom from your firm, or
To repeat that.
Okay, we have to have the light on. Can you hear? There you go. Okay, once again, I'm Beth Kushner with the Deputy Director of Administration for the New York City Deferred Compensation Plan.
I'm Mai Chow, Chief Accountant of Deferred Comp.
I'm Ivy Singh and financial assistant.
And I'm Logan Wilson with the external auditors, Clifton Larson Allen.
And to restate it, Jim Kreiser, Principal with Clifton Larson Allen.
thank you.
Do you want to start with the financials or with the cyber?
Let's start with the financials first.
Okay.
Okay. So for 2024, we had 33.6 billion assets. This is a 0.6 billion increase from 2023. Total participant we have is 249,000. This is an increase of 5,000 from the previous year. So that's just like a summary.
So is,
Well, I know, but just for the record, there were no changes in the tax laws or anything like that regarding.
there are changes coming with the Secure Act 2.0. So we are getting ready to implement those changes. Some of the changes we have implemented, like if you're between ages 60 and 63, you have an opportunity to contribute more during those years. We have coming up, we have the Secure Act 2.0 for what's going to change is people who are contributing over age 50, and if they have a certain income threshold, they're going to have to make those over age 50 contributions to the Roth account, not the pre-tax. So these are some changes. We're working with the payrolls because they're pretty significant changes. So those things will come on January 1st of 2026. So other things that changed during the year, the board made a decision to move the international fund to an international equity fund, so it's now passively managed. That was a pretty big change. I'm trying to think of other changes that happened during the year. Think of any other investment. Our portfolios, the prearranged portfolios, this year, the 2065 fund was added, and the 2010 fund rolled down into what we call the static allocation fund. Because the way the portfolios work is that over time they wind down, meaning their equity exposure lessens and their fixed income exposure increases until it gets to the static allocation fund, where the idea is the person will be in retirement and wants a more stable investment. So those are the big investment changes during the year. year.
There was also one change for beneficiaries. For a non-spousal beneficiary can only take it, has to take it only over 10 years.
Oh, the distribution options.
The RMD.
The RMDs, there were some changes with the Secure Act. The age went up to 73 now for RMDs. So we're implementing all of these changes as they come through, working with our record keeper, Voya. Sure.
Okay, I'm Mark Kaplan. Two little things. First of all, it is the capital city of New York. And you have it right one place and wrong all the other places. Tiny little thing.
Capital T.
Think about it. Other thing, more substantive. Have anybody who comes in from the outside looks at the portfolios.
Yes, the board reviews them on a regular basis with the plan's consultants. The plan has 3 consultants that they work with, so we do have a technical committee that will review them. Actually, they're going to be doing a review shortly. They are also rebalanced quarterly.
Those three consultants. Ever get somebody in from all the way outside to look at what you do?
No, just the consultants. And the auditors come in annually, and
I
then...
understand that, but the issue is auditors are not responsible for anything but checking.
Right.
But the performance and how you do it is something. I'm asking whether you every once in a while bring in totally outside consultant, look at the impact of the performances that you have selected.
Just with the consultants we have, the board has contracted with.
Are those consultants from different companies? Or is
Yes,
it just
yes.
So you have like different points of view kind of represented in the
Yes, on page
consultancies?
9, we have we have CAP Financial Partners, Siegel Marco Advisors, and NEPC. So those are the 3 consulting firms that the board works with. And Siegel Marco prepares a quarterly performance report they bring to the board every quarter. And then on an annual basis, the board and the committee, the technical committee, they have a full overview of the portfolios to make sure that...
Do you periodically bring in somebody who's never been there to take a look at how you're doing compared to whoever that expert thinks you should be?
No, just the consultants.
Consultants are consulting on the things that they recommended.
Well, the way the board has set it up is one consultant will help with the procurements, the other consultant will do the performance review. So you're not having the same consultant look at their own performance on what they selected with the board. So I don't know if that helps answer your question.
They're not auditing their own recommendations.
Right.
The performance auditor is giving recommendations entirely objectively at the direction of the board.
Just for the record, you have an audit committee?
We do have an audit committee. There are 3 members of the board. It's the chair is the Office of Management and Budget, along with the Comptroller's Office and Department of Finance. That's the subcommittee of the board for the audit.
You don't have anybody who's truly independent.
No, those are the 3 board members committee members that the board selected for the committee.
Larian, you have any comments or questions?
No, I have no questions at this point. Thank you.
Okay. So you want to go on to the cyber?
Sure. So a few years back, the recommendation was for the plan to buy cybersecurity insurance, which we do have. Board went ahead and purchased that, so we do have cyber insurance. We also have the cyber audit, which is part of our IT audit as well. With that, and I'll let Jim talk more to that, but we work with Cyber Command, OTI, the city, and we follow all the rules and policies. We work with them on the penetration testing, internal and external. And then CLA also does their own penetration testing and their phishing, and I'll let Jim speak to that.
Yeah, so the Cyber Command performs an internal monthly scan and penetration test of the plan's network. In order to conform with Department of Financial Services cybersecurity regulations, we also then work with the plan and are hired to conduct an external penetration test, and then we do an additional internal and phishing assessment along with that. I'm happy to say, I think for the second year in a row, external penetration testing yielded no results. So pretty solid. I don't want to get too technical. I'm here to answer questions, but to do the rest of our procedures, we have to do this thing called whitelisting just to be able to execute it because we're unable to compromise any vulnerabilities on the network.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, the test of the employees. And I'll say answering an email by, which is always a big problem.
It was a $50 gift card. I think that's what got them.
I didn't realize that was it.
I will say the plan's results in our phishing test are probably a good side. We had about a 6% hit rate. Quite honestly, candidly, our national average is about 18% of employees will click those messages. So, and it's a significant improvement over prior years.
We have a CISO that's dedicated to the plan, a chief information security officer, and he has done a tremendous job in making sure that all our staff are getting their training. I get an email every quarter about who on my staff did not complete their training. So we've made I think it shows in this year's report that we are making efforts to make sure the staff, along with the OTI training that we all get, we're doing additional training to make sure that it gets reinforced.
One quick question about the report. Are we considered a regulatory authority?
Certainly considered an oversight.
No, because of the last paragraph.
Yes, so the report can be shared with you all, yes.
Okay.
Yes, but, I obviously understand we try to take great lengths to do as much as we can to limit that report and the details that are shared.
No,
because there are some vulnerabilities,
Yeah.
there are some results that we identify. And
There were lots of reports we get, and that's the first time I ever saw that language in the last paragraph. I just wanted to confirm that in your mind, and especially DCP, that we are considered a regulatory authority and we have the authority or permission to review this report.
Yes. We're pretty sure that you're not going to share it. So.
I'm sorry, Beth.
I said, we're pretty sure you're not going to share it outside of this committee.
I could guarantee you would not. No, but, the steps that were taken, seemed very extensive. And that there were no critical deficiencies, except this faux pas, but it was a test.
correct.
What would happen if you upped it to a $100 gift card?
I get calls all the time, is this a trick? I said, I'm not saying.
We do change those scenarios, so it isn't the same thing every year. We do work with Beth and her team on what is the scenario or scheme, if you will, that we're going to.
Benefit to us, Smith and Walensky?
Yes.
Have a repeat offender, what happens?
That's a good question.
Well, once CLA will let us know who those offenders offenders, if I can call them that, who they were. Our CISO actually reached out to them directly and had a conversation with them. They were told that they had failed the phishing and they had clicked and could put the office at risk, and they would receive additional training. The two staff members, not to make any excuses, but they had only started 4 months ago and had not completed all of their training. So they were very embarrassed, but we do reach out directly to the employee and let them know that they require additional training and give them some ideas about what to do and not to do. Repeat offenders, I don't think we've had any. So I guess that would be a problem.
Oh, I was impressed that, you know, like you did penetration. You know, like, you weren't able to get in.
Correct. I will tell you that the plan has taken great measures to ensure that from an external perspective, the IP subnet is well masked, well protected, does not respond to undefined or unlisted sources for ping, for query, for all of those types of things that we do to try to identify, ephemeral ports. Again, I don't want to get too technical, but we're pinging about 17,000 ports on these machines, trying to get any of them to respond and say, hey, yes, I'm this machine, would you like to log in? That kind of thing. And they have that pretty well locked down. It does not respond to unknown sources.
Okay. Besides both of these reports, and one's financial and one's the cyber, there was no management letter?
There is not.
I asked the question, but that's a good thing. Larry?
No, I'm fine now at this point. I'm fine.
I'm sorry?
Bases.
What page?
Basic, sorry. Oh.
Before.
Bottom of the page.
Fifth line from the bottom, all the way to the left.
Page 8, you said?
Four.
Oh, sorry, this is page 4, 8.
So when we're looking at, when we're doing our testing, right, so I guess to clarify, not only are we doing cyber testing as part of the cybersecurity regulations under New York State Department of Financial Services and doing those additional security procedures, we're also doing IT general control testing as part of the financial audit itself. Are there any control deficiencies or weaknesses that we may then need to adjust our auditing procedures based on the risk that would pose? So when we look at system access, we're basically, that's our way of saying we're specifically doing judgmental testing towards folks like Beth, who have more persuasive influence and duties, roles, and authority in the organization, so that when we're doing our testing, we're not just doing a random sample of 5, 10 folks. We want to make sure we're getting individuals and judgmentally sampling those that we know may have more role, more authority, more influence, more persuasion in the organization when we're testing their access. Correct. Sorry about that. That took me a little while to find it. Sorry.
Since there's no other comments or questions, I'd like to thank you for coming. Let's try to stay cool and enjoy the summer.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank
See
you
you
very
next
much.
year.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Good morning.
morning. Oh, I see Jackie as well. So we have,
If Jackie hides in the corner.
nonetheless, distinguished, we notice her. So there are a couple of personnel changes that I'd like to flag first. So as you know, at the last meeting, we announced that Peggy Horning was retiring after many years of service. She's since been replaced by Marianne Mullaney, who has now stepped up to the Assistant Comptroller role, along with Edward, who remains an Assistant Comptroller, and Tara Leary, who's long been in the Audit Bureau, has over 30 years with the Audit Bureau, has just stepped up to Executive Director level. So in terms of organization, we are in process of trying to create more what you would call pods. So we have one more leadership position to fill, which will be focused on vendor audits. But then we will have, some of the teams were too big, really, given the complexity of audits that we're handling. I don't know if you've noticed, but under Comptroller Lander's leadership, the focus has been very much on audits that can deliver change and that are complex, rather than, focused on actual outcomes of programs, and that based on their ability to potentially deliver change to New York City, rather than on numbers. And that has put a certain amount of pressure on the team because the way that we audit has changed to a certain extent. So in fiscal year 24, we continue to focus, as I said, on audits that have the potential to deliver change. In terms of subject matter and the way we measure our outcomes, the focus is around the office's strategic objectives. So at the start of every engagement, we set what strategic objectives based on what we expect to find, and at the end, we measure our potential impact based on what we actually did find, so the nature of the findings and recommendations. In fiscal year 24, about 44% had a primary objective in terms of findings and recs of improving effective operations. 30% were focused on equity. 17% related to the city's fiscal position, and about 9% we expected to mitigate risk, or actually did mitigate risk, assuming the recommendations are implemented, right? In terms of secondary impacts, 28% had a focus on mitigating risk, 11% were intended to improve equity, and 11% involved us testing and surveying amongst end users as a way to assess impact. So we have markedly increased our survey use and also our consultation with stakeholders at the beginning of engagements and during. I would say that we also measure over time. We look at whether or not these are being implemented. We also consider whether or not we've generated a response from the administration or from City Council in the way of hearings, in the way of legislative change, and we're very conscious of media coverage, not because Brad Lander is a politician, but because we have no direct ability to force change. So the best opportunity for our audits to deliver change is to get political, public attention and buy-in, right? So that has been our focus. As of today, in terms of the responses to draft reports, 74% of the recommendations were agreed with, and a further 10% were partially agreed with in terms of the fiscal year 24 issuances. As of today, 60% of these have been implemented based on reporting from agencies, and a further 31% remain pending. That's pretty consistent with the overall trends that we're seeing. It seems to take a year and a half, 2 years for recommendations that have been committed to be implemented are actually reported as implemented. In terms of the agency response, we see that fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 24 were pretty consistent. There's very little change in terms of the percentages. Fiscal year 23, as I reported last time we met, continues to stand out. There was a much higher rate of disagreement and a much lower rate, obviously, of agreement or partial agreement. So we'll continue to monitor that and see where how that impacts implementation rates over time. If we look back at all of the recommendations that were issued, yeah.
Larian, did you have a question?
No, thank you. No, I don't have a question at this time.
Okay. So when we look back over time, I looked this morning, we have a live recommendations tracker. Every 2 to 3 months, we go back out to the agencies and ask, have you implemented recommendations? What is the status of the recommendations in the reports? That is a change that was implemented in Brad Lander's time. Previously to that, under the charter, we're required to do a once and done for the purpose of the annual report, and that's what was done. We now continue to track over time. So if we look at everything that was issued from January 1, 2022 to the present day, at the moment, the implementation rate cumulatively is 53%, and we have a 31% rate of pending. The 31% pending means that the agency reported they are still intending to implement. They just have not yet had an opportunity to do so or to complete implementation. So I think that's a fairly good record. It's about, my math is bad, but 84% cumulatively. So we're very pleased with that. We also, we have said, auditors will tell you that even though an agency says they will not they don't agree with the recommendation and they will not implement or they choose not to address it, we do find over time that they do actually implement. And so we've begun tracking this. For recs issued since January 1, 2022, approximately 5% that were disagreement with have been reported as implemented, 7% have been reported as partially implemented, and really the big aha is in the not addressed category. Fully 46% of those not addressed by the agency in response to the draft have now been reported as implemented, and a further 8% have been reported as partially implemented. In terms of media coverage, since January 22, we've seen a steady increase in the number that receive good coverage. If you look at those that receive no coverage, right, media did not pick up and report on, the number was something like 80% in calendar year 22. That number, as of year-to-date 25, has come down to 42%. And in terms of reports that have generated very good coverage, based on the number of media outlets that reported it, has gone up. It went up marginally in 23 and calendar year 24, but as of year-to-date for calendar year 25, it's over 40%. So we're also very pleased with that, again, for the potential to deliver change and mobilize interest.
Actually, I'm sorry. I actually do have a question, if that's okay for now. My question is, are there some agencies that tend to resist or, not want to implement? Are there agencies that just generally have that approach, or is it just scattered?
I mean, I haven't got statistics here based on agency, and part of the difficulty with that is that each agency undergoes a small number of audits each year, and even over a 4-year term, a particular agency may be audited 4, 5, 6 times at max. Many have only been audited once. But anecdotally, the staff will certainly tell you, and we can see a tonal difference in the responses. When you look at the responses that are published and appended to the back of the final reports, you will see that some are downright spitty. Really, they object very strenuously, insist that we are wrong. And there are others who are much more philosophical and say, yeah, I get it. We will try to change. My experience individually, having been in other agencies, particularly DSS, at both on the HRA side and the DHS side, and at DCAS, is that that's very much driven by the commissioner. Some commissioners are willing to just say, yep, okay, we need to address that, and others really take it very personally and insist that there is nothing wrong and that we're wrong. One of the reasons we track that no response and disagreed with and what percent convert to implemented is because of that. In the heat of the audit, people are offended sometimes. And so it's interesting to see that even if they didn't address it, they do implement over time at a fairly high rate. Does
It's very
that answer?
interesting. Yes, yes, it does. Yeah. Thank you.
Get addressed.
Well, sometimes they don't. If they don't get addressed, there's a certain point at which the agencies will just say, no, we haven't implemented and we have no intention of implementing. And at that point, we cease tracking. Like we report it as not implemented, but we don't continue to pester them every 3 months because they've very been affirmative in saying we are not going to implement. And the reality is we have no authority to force that change. So, I think this is why, we spoke last time about people-powered auditing and our participatory approach. And although the audits were not issued in fiscal year 24, we did complete the 2 NYCHA audits that were very focused on participatory auditing. And, the goal there was to mobilize beyond the comptroller's office to give advocates and folks who are stakeholders in the process evidence-based numbers and conclusions to use as tools that continue on. And we've seen a certain amount of success in that. I mean, one of the ones that stands out to me is, well, the speed camera report. We identified almost $108 million in foregone revenue based on ghost plates and obscured plates. The numbers had gone up year on year on year in, and nobody was taking any action. Well, the administration did not come and tell us, oh, it's because of the audit. But within a month, Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul had galvanized a law enforcement response to address this. In the context of tolls, but it's related, right? One of the recommendations in the audit was that the DOT should work with other stakeholders, for example, Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, who are experiencing similar problems and a similar impact on revenue collection and therefore deterrence by failing to address these. So we can see that sort of thing and we also report on it. We also have been asked to testify regularly before City Council. We testified in response, for example, to the review of the 60-day rule on asylum seekers. Marianne handled the testimony really well. We had a very good response. I recently testified following the NYCHA audits, and we do track local law implementation that comes about. The most, I think, one that's a very good example, even though it doesn't relate to fiscal year 24 issuances, was the sweeps audit. We looked at sweeps, and one of the recommendations and conclusions was that the Department of Social Services really doesn't track the extent to which they engage with people on the street that they're being moved on or report any data. And they declined in response to the audit report to change their data reporting. Well, this year, local law, I can't remember the number, went into effect, and they are now required to report data, not just from DSS, but also NYPD and the other agencies that are involved in the process. So
I have one more question. So after you do this report, do you have a meeting with the deputy mayors in each area? Have a discussion about what you found, what you didn't find, what worked, what didn't?
The Audit Bureau rarely does. Once we issue a report, our policy and public affairs arms tend to take over. Mm-hmm. So policy will frequently, and Intergov will frequently work with various folks at City Council, find sponsors for bills, help with drafting, and do that, and try and get those things implemented. That's what happened with the sweeps bill. So audit's role kind of ended
Mm-hmm.
at that point, but other folks within the office took over
Yeah.
in their areas of expertise.
Yeah.
And it works very well.
Yeah, I wonder though if there was some, if there could be some discussion with deputy mayors about what was found in their area. It might actually, speed the process along, perhaps.
Well, it's certainly worth considering. Yeah. A lot of it depends on willingness. I'm not sure to what extent the current administration has been overall willing to address changes. I do know that after the asylum seeker, in terms of the 60-day rule, there was engagement. It didn't personally involve the audit team, but there was engagement with the administration. I don't believe we saw much change in response to it. Do you think of much change?
I would like to comment
Yeah.
on my own experience with another part of the organization. When the Board of Ed set up an audit committee, that's before, a long time ago, we would get somebody who got a rotten audit report in front of the audit committee. And I never forget, some principal said to me, I've never had a report card that bad. Give me a chance next year. And the next year was an A+. And so the question I'm putting to you is, if you had a couple of recalcitrant people, would bringing them before this audit committee embarrass them into performance?
It's difficult to say. I guess the question is, has it been done before within this audit committee?
As far as I know, no.
Yeah. My understanding is, and I'm by no means an expert, is that you could do so. One of the things that we are seeing that we hope to address with the next administration is that response times from agency is getting markedly worse. So much so that we are noodling the idea of piloting findings around failure to respond and cooperate in the audits.
I don't speak for my fellow members here, but I personally would welcome the opportunity to have somebody sitting in that chair explaining bad grades.
Yeah, well, we're working on it for the current calendar year. One of the things that is facilitating it is we are in process of rolling out a new system of record, which will enable us to capture response rates during an audit. So we will be able to measure the number of days of the, let's say, 500 days it took from the start to the end of an audit. How much of that time was spent waiting for a meeting, waiting for data and records, and we are going to begin reporting it in audit reports. So you should watch this space. And I hesitate to call out agencies, but there are certain agencies that notoriously are slow and unresponsive. And when I first came in, we were concerned about the amount of time it takes to complete some audits. And so we introduced something called a time budgeting tool. And one of the things that we consider when we set a time frame, a target time frame, is the degree to which the agency typically cooperates, because that is the one metric that is really beyond our control. We beg, we plead, we elevate up the chain. But the reality is some agencies are notoriously slow, and some would say deliberately slow, in producing what we need to complete audits. So that's what's driving the impetus. That's the impetus behind, okay, let's create a finding for particularly difficult agencies and put it in the report so it's out there in the public domain. And we're talking about setting up a dashboard to report that as well, because the public has a right to know. And the administration hopefully will take note and take steps to correct. That's certainly the goal. So watch this space. In terms of the audit reports that came out this year, I'm going to blow our own horns for one, and that was the ShotSpotter audit. This office has not traditionally, or the Audit Bureau has not traditionally engaged with other auditors across the country. I'm really pleased to say that in the last couple of years, we have engaged very heavily with the National Association of Local Government Auditors. This year, for the first time, or last year, based on 24 audit releases, we submitted one audit report for consideration, and we won. We won the Knighton Exemplary Award for performance auditing, and we're really pleased and chuffed that that was the case. The audit judges, and this is national, right? So we're really pleased about that. We went and presented on the findings. I presented, in fact, at ALGA. We also had teams there this year presenting on NYCHA and also on the express bus engagement under the theory of participatory auditing. And, it's good for us to get out there and learn from other people and also to teach lessons as we see them, right? It's good to be involved. So we're really pleased about that. In terms of the ShotSpotter Award, one of the things the judges said was that the team went well beyond the contract in assessing its effectiveness, right? What we found in the end in that particular engagement was that there was an ineffective measure built into the contract. And based on that measure, ShotSpotter was a stellar tool. It met the performance metrics 90% of the time, month in, month out. But when we looked at the accuracy and measured to what extent the alerts generated a confirmed shot, woefully small. We only did it on a sample monthly basis, but as low as 8 and 20% were verified. And we also looked at the dollar amount involved for patrolmen and women to go out and respond to those alerts, and also documented that and found that it was a heavy cost in terms of headcount and also cost. So we're really pleased with that one. I think there are a number of others that stand out. I think the Ames report, audit report was very interesting. Ames is a tool that OMB uses based on a charter mandate to assess what the city's capital need will be over time. We found that it bore no relationship to the actual cost of repair as projects were undertaken. We also found that auditing was inaccurate and flawed, right? That's roughly an $11 million exercise every year, and we recommended improvements. We also did a fair share audit, which looked at the siting of facilities that are considered undesirable in New York City and found that they were unfairly and disproportionately distributed in certain neighborhoods. And we found that a number of agencies and the DCP were not in compliance with the fair share requirements. That was one that was issued with a companion piece by our policy team that did a much broader look at where we are today based on successive years of decision-making. And if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to take a look. I'll be happy to send you a link. It's a very interesting piece of work and documents which neighborhoods have really got the lion's share of homeless shelters and so forth. Yeah. I think another one that was very interesting from an equity perspective was a review of the early childhood salaries. Toward the end of the de Blasio administration, there was a commitment made to create pay parity amongst early childhood providers who were under the direct, being administered by DOE directly versus community-based organizations. We went in and we looked at salaries and found that that promise had not borne fruit. We have yet to see a resolution. There are a lot of discussions going on involving the comptroller and also elsewhere. I'm not sure in the current budget environment to what extent that will be fixed, but the comptroller is very firmly committed to that pay parity because early childhood development is important and people who are doing the work need to be earning living wages. Okay?
Where does the funding come from for the community-based?
It's all under DOE, right?
So it's all the cities.
It's city funding, yeah. But you know, if you look at people with the same qualifications at DOE versus working for a community-based organization, there's a very significant pay difference. And so the goal was to shine a light on that and say, hey, these need to come up.
But it's DOE that's funding
Yeah.
the community-based.
Yes, right. So DOE needs to take action and they need OMB to support it. You know, and that means city council and others involved in the process stepping up and saying, this is a priority. And, you know, we recognize that as auditors, that agencies are, to a certain extent, hemmed in by OMB decisions, by resource decisions, and other decisions that ultimately inform their ability to make change. We try and note that in the reports when they tell us we can't get funding for that, or we really don't have the resources to carry that out. And then our recommendations tend to be framed with respect to consider seeking funding, consider increasing resources, because the reality is everything is not within the direct control of even the commissioner of an agency. Yeah. So did you have any particular
Yeah,
questions
I have
about
a-
particular audits?
Yeah, as we were talking about before, getting somebody in, all the bids at one time appeared before us. And then because of, I'll say, their size, the amount of money, we started to cut back on them. And then I guess we haven't seen any, probably in about 3 or 4 years, or at least since before COVID.
Well, 47th Street bid audit, which Marianne's team handled, was a follow-up audit. We went in to look and see to what extent recommendations had been implemented. As you know, the comptroller's office has a representative on the bid boards, and so we were asked by those representatives to please go back and take another look. At that time, at the start of the audit, and indeed at the conclusion of the audit, that bid did not have a contract, and yet SBS had continued to provide them with city funds. So they were without a contract for several years. The reason they were not is because SBS basically said, you need to agree to a certain amount of monitoring and certain activity, certain changes for you to renew your contract. They declined to participate in that, and so there was no contract. But they still got city funding. At this point, there is a contract. We did lobby very hard with the Commissioner of SBS to cut off city funding after the report was issued, but I'm not sure whether that was ever carried out. Certainly, it was probably being considered at the point at which they went back into contract. But if you read the report, you'll see there were certain things that were implemented, certain things that were not implemented, and we also found new issues of import. Yeah. So it's certainly one that bears watching over time. Yes.
Could you send us a copy of the actual report?
Sure, be happy to.
And, you know, I'm thinking of calling them back in here.
I think it's a good idea.
Are there any others, bids, without names because we don't have anything, that
We don't have any other bids based on audits that are particularly on our radar. You know, we did Kingsbridge. In Kingsbridge, we found a lot of governance problems, but we concluded that they were not malicious so much as a lack of experience. So, for example, there were nepotism issues. The ED hired her daughter and supervised her daughter, signed off on her daughter's timesheets, and so we recommended that there be a nepotism policy, that it be adhered to, among other changes. But we didn't, the sense wasn't that they were willfully, out of compliance. I think 47th Street bid is a different case altogether. I don't think there's any other bids at the moment that are on the radar. But I can certainly canvass our public affairs shop and ask. They're the ones who, oh God, do you know off the top of your head?
Because we had bids coming before us that, and we would only see their audited financials with their management letters, $30,000.
Yeah.
Yet there were others in the millions, and in some cases, they went and borrowed money.
Well, you know, we did a bid fiscal analysis based on financial reporting. I believe did we issue that in 22 or 23? There was a huge hue and cry from the bids collectively. They hired a private attorney. They came and made representations that our reporting was inaccurate, that our trend analysis was a problem, you know. But we looked at the financial reporting that went to SBS based on their audited financial records and identified a number of bids that had issues, right? Overspending in some areas.
No, because that was one of
Yeah.
the outcomes that we asked SBS to do a lot of reviewing of all their audited financial statements. Some cases, they didn't even have auditors. Some cases, the auditors that they had weren't on the controller's auditing list.
Right. Well, I'd be happy to send you a copy of that analysis. We haven't repeated it since then, but we could in future. I think one of the things that was recommended to SBS in the aftermath is that they needed to unify the way bids were reporting, because not all bids reported in the same way to SBS, even though SBS had set guidelines. They weren't adhered to, and SBS appeared not to be aware that they were inconsistent. So that was a case where SBS did not respond formally, but we held briefings for them and consultation after the analysis was reported, and had several conversations about how that could be improved, with public affairs taking the lead on that. Yeah.
I have one more question, if I may. When you were talking about auditing the capital program, did you include School Construction Authority in that, or did you review them separately?
Yeah, we did not. I don't believe. Did we? I don't think so. I think School Construction Authority sits outside. I will tell you that we're about to begin a School Construction Authority audit because based on a number of complaints we have received across the system from parents and others that it is not working, that their oversight of capital projects is not solid. So we're about to begin that this year.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm sort of surprised because I always thought School Construction Authority worked fairly well, but yeah, I'd like to see the report. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah, sure. Any other questions?
Yeah. Larry, and any other questions? Comments?
No, thank you. Not right now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you
and,
very much. Thank you, Deb. Pleased to be here.
At this time, I'd like to have a motion to go into executive session. Thank you.
Please stop the recording.
Recording stopped. In progress.
I'd like to have a motion to adjourn executive session.
I so move.
We are now in open session. Since there is no other task to come before the audit committee, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn today's session. Thank you. Everybody stay cool and enjoy the summer.
We can end recording.
Recording stopped.